All right, well, it looks like it's 3:32. I think maybe in the interest of time, we should get started. Virginia, do you want to lead us in the next part?
Yeah, you bet. You know, these things get scheduled and then our worlds change, and it doesn't feel right to not acknowledge the pain that our community has been in since the murder of George Floyd last week. I thought for anybody who wanted to, one of the things my team likes to do is take the time to stop having conversations about looters and white supremacists and neighborhood watch and all the things and get back to the core of what's important right now, which is a part of it, what started all of this, the murder of George Floyd. So I thought we could take a moment, and if you unmute yourself and say his name, and then we'll have a minute of silence before we begin talking about what we're gonna do today, just to have a moment to give space to the tragedy of his death and all the work we all need to do to make our communities better. So I'll start by saying George Floyd.
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
George Floyd. George Floyd.
George Floyd. George Floyd. George Floyd.
Floyd.
Okay, I'm gonna bring us back. Really appreciate everybody taking that moment to pay our respects. It's a great way for me to start crying at the beginning of a virtual meeting, so that's awesome. I think with that, I'm gonna actually pass it back to Tricia, yeah, to take us through the next little bit.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tricia.
All right, well, hi everyone. I'm Tricia Wright, and I am a member of AFP Minnesota, and also on the membership committee here. When I'm not doing my volunteer role there, I'm also an independent consultant, and I work with nonprofits to help with strategy and fundraising. Today, we have 4 co-facilitators to help us, and the 3 other co-facilitators with me today have all recently hosted an event that was intended initially to be in person, and it was converted to a virtual event with COVID-19. And so I'm just gonna have each one of them introduce themselves, and then also share a little bit about their event, specifically the top 3 things that they learned from the event that they hosted. We'll start out that way just so you get to kind of know us. If you want to know a little bit more detail about their events, we sent out a document in the reminder email that you got from me earlier today that has a summary of the events that they held with goals and a lot of great detail if you're interested in that. So I'll turn it over to Virginia to start with her introduction, and then we'll go to Alyssa and Ellie.
Thank you, Tricia. Yeah, and I guess I could have said who I was before, but I'm Virginia Brown. I'm the Vice President of Advancement at Aeon. We're an affordable housing provider, providing homes to 12,000 people in the Twin Cities across the metro area. Let's see, I go by she, her, hers, and for my event, which just like Tricia said, you can see more details about, my 3 hard lessons were, so we work with low-income residents, and one of the things that our events was much harder virtually, and so that's something my team will continue to struggle with. It's in addition to, it's also a really hard time to ask a resident to get on a Zoom call and talk to people when they are struggling as much as they are. That's a struggle. We also have been doing really well with other fundraising, so the event ended up feeling almost like a distraction to what was working really well. So we'll wait that.
Virginia, you're cutting out.
Next time. And then because we were in triage, we were only on us, you know, we
Sorry to say this, but Virginia, you're cutting out quite a bit.
Those are my lessons.
Unfortunately. So let's go ahead and turn it over to
Me next? Sorry, I missed that. I guess I'll go. My name is Alyssa Whalon. I'm an event manager at YWCA in Minneapolis. I use she, her pronouns. And for AFP, I am on the IDEA committee, and I'm also on the National Philanthropy Day committee. And so for my top 3 lessons, I think the first one is communication is really, really important. We realized that for our internal communications and our external communications, just making sure everybody kind of knew what their goals were for, you know, the next couple of weeks for our event. And then to set realistic expectations. But that's also helpful to set some goals. We didn't set any really goals around our engagement. We set some financial goals, but not so much on the engagement. And so I felt it was a little bit hard afterwards to kind of judge how we did if we didn't set goals at the beginning. And then the last thing, my event, we did a 12-hour giving day instead of having an event. And that took a lot of work to put 12 hours together. We didn't have something happening every single hour, you know, for that whole 12 hours, but for most of that time we were putting out content. And so I think we could have used that time in different ways, getting us some of our ambassadors involved and getting some of our sponsors more engaged in our event.
Thanks, Alyssa. Ellie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie Smith, and I'm the events manager for Animal Humane Society. For 48 years, we've had a huge event called the Walk for Animals, and it's normally an event where we invite over 9,000 attendees and 5,000 pets to our shelter in Golden Valley. This year, as why we're all here, we had to quickly pivot that and make sure it was a virtual experience. So it took us 5 weeks and we learned many lessons, but the top 3 lessons that we learned is making sure that your messaging and communication is very concise. Not too many calls to action, making sure that it's easily digestible for the audience, virtual. The second thing we learned is to make sure that we are planning realistically. The climate was changing almost every other week, maybe even every other day it seemed like. So to really make sure that we weren't caught up in dream scenarios and just planning realistically for what we could actually offer. And the third and final lesson that we learned was making sure that we are connecting our supporters to the why they support us, why we need them to donate, walk, and celebrate. And that even though our physical event was canceled, that you can't cancel love, and that the animals needed us now more than ever during this COVID time.
Great. Thanks, Ellie. I just love that can't cancel love bit. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share right now so we can kind of see each other. And at first, I just want to kind of walk through what we have intended for our structure today. But before I do that, we want to thank MGI Consulting for sponsoring our AFP Minnesota networking event. So thank you to them. The goal of our gathering today is really to create a space for fundraisers to connect, provide support, and share information about what people are thinking and doing and resources we're all using. We chose not to have an expert panel, although we do have some expert co-facilitators, but rather rely on the expertise that we all have collectively in our work together. We are recording the session because we often receive requests for people who are unable to attend and they want to learn more. If you are comfortable, we prefer to use video so that we can see each other. And then with the size of group we have today, I haven't looked to see exactly how many people we have, but quite a number of people. We plan to have a breakout room format. So we'll ask a question, divide into breakout rooms, and then spend 10 minutes in a breakout room. After that, we'll come back together as a large group to debrief. And then we'll repeat this one more time. So we'll have a second question, go into breakout rooms, and then come back together a second time to debrief. When we're in that large group, we will mute ourselves when you're not talking, and we'll be using the raise your hand button to encourage participation, as well as encouraging you to join a conversation in chat. So feel free to raise your hand with the Zoom button, which should be under the participants tab if you haven't found it before. Feel free to pop a question in the chat if you're having trouble finding that. Now let's go ahead and I'll turn it back to Virginia, who's going to take us into our breakout rooms after she shares the question.
Great. I'm going to try video again. Wish us luck. Yeah, so for the first question, we're going to go in our breakout rooms and talk about the virtual events we've been to lately. We want to know, what ideas have you seen that impressed you? If you've run an event, what worked well, or what would you change for next time? Really, this is about what have you experienced, whether it's an event you're hosting or not, that we can share with others, because part of the point of us all getting together is just to get a lot of ideas on the table so we all have fodder for the future. So I think with that, Tricia, we can move to our breakout rooms. Great.
Yep, I will open them up in just a moment, and I'm going to set them to automatically close after 10 minutes. And you'll receive a countdown for the last minute. So hopefully this will work. Thanks. I'll be joining breakout room 4.
Great. See you soon. Can I hear from someone from the first group?
Well, Martha had the most.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have been to 3 events, and yeah, it's kind. I mean, I'm so happy to have a job, but I'm going broke giving money to people. So,
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
But they were all different. We kind of agreed that a pre-recorded event it really eliminates a lot of variables, such as the Wi-Fi goes out or somebody gets off script or whatever. They're very smooth. They tend to be shorter, which is good. Tubman did kind of a hybrid, that they did some live and some recorded, and that worked out pretty well. One organization their auction was like a week long, and I just thought I didn't think that really worked. Although I gave them some money anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think it's people are trying some interesting things. It's creative, and I'm here to just get informed myself, because I'm probably going to do something in September.
Great. Thank you, Martha. Anything else from group 1, or should we move on to group 2?
Well, the only thing I'd add that I think the members in our group were interested in hearing was Neighborhood House did a live 15-minute interview with the executive director, and it was about the changes and how they were trying to navigate and pivot. And it was very moving. It was educational. It was informative. There was a place for you to get engaged as a donor, as a volunteer, all new roles, because they had to move from inside the building for the majority of their services and programs to curbside, and what that took. So she did a really nice job, the executive director, explaining it, and then building the visual so that you want to get engaged on a donor, volunteer, or advocate level.
That's great, Nancy. Thank you. And I can say that after having done one kind of larger event with a lot of moving pieces, we're now moving to something more like that, like just simple, no scripts, in and out, like as little work as possible, because that's all people really need right now too.
Well, and I'll give you one quick example if it's okay. She talked about
Can I
things
actually,
that you wouldn't think about.
just be real quick though.
Yeah, like that some of the Asian Americans stopped coming to the food shelf suddenly, and they sent people out to find out why, because of the infamous COVID from the Chinese, rhetoric that's been flying around. It was very moving.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are the things donors want to know about.
Yeah.
Okay, what about group 2? Who can speak up and share what you heard in that group? Ellie, Alyssa, who owned that one? Come on. Fall and tell someone.
I was in one.
Okay, I guess that was my group, number 2.
You gotta call out somebody.
Yeah, Tim, do you want to maybe kind of give an overview?
Sure. We had, 3 or 4 different points about events, the different experiences that people had. I think there's some lines of consistency here among other people that have reported from other groups. Shorter events, minor issues around production and whether there's value having something highly produced versus, maybe a bit more live, taped versus live, those types of things that we discussed. I was giving a little bit of an overview of what I saw at the McPhail School for Music event, that they broke their luncheon event into 3 different online events. CEO opened it, welcomed everybody, and then amazing music, variety of different musicians. It really was a concert in itself. You could look at it any time. And then a request for funding, and they did really well with it. So, but it was highly produced. Everything was done in the studio ahead of time, or I should say studio ahead of time. It was produced in the studio, edited, I think, in the studio. Alyssa, is that what you wanted?
Yeah, that's great. I think Virginia, you are muted.
Sorry, thank you, Alyssa. Yeah, I said, oh, to have a studio, that would be nice. So let's move on to group 3, which was my group. I know Jennifer T, I think, had agreed to speak on our behalf.
Yep. It seemed like most of our participants had not done their virtual event yet. I think Virginia, you were probably the only one that has done the virtual event. I think we all took away there that the response, one of the comments was a response from individual donors was really great. Just having those conversations with donors and corporate sponsors. A lot of us already have corporate sponsors that already had committed to the event and were still committed, and just expressing what that means to us as organizations, we felt was really important in maintaining those relationships, even if corporations were not able to still sponsor, just making sure that they know that we're thinking of them and hope that they can rejoin us in the next year, not burning those bridges with those businesses that are not able to support. Also looking at different ways to honor those sponsorships with more social media, and possibly we talked about ticketing, whether people were doing single admission tickets or not, and a lot of people were discounting tickets, or there weren't ticket fees for individuals. So I think that probably covers most of it. I know I had mentioned that we are utilizing our local TV station to produce our event in November. So I'll be interested to see what others do prior to us. I know in our community, we have a few that are already scheduled. So I think we'll probably learn from each other. And I think that's probably all that we have to recap from our group.
Thank you, Jennifer. Great job. And thanks, Tim. Sorry I missed that on my muting. Is there a fourth group? Was there a fourth group, Tricia?
Yes, I was with the fourth group, and I guess I volunteered myself since no one else wanted to take the role to report back. But a couple of things we talked about. Carrie shared that with Banyan, where she works, they had an event and they switched to a video format, and that they were pleased with that, and they value the longer shelf life that video will have in being able to be useful for their organization. A couple of the other people in our group had events coming up this summer, golf events, and Tessa in Wisconsin mentioned that her golf event was in June and they've moved it to August, but she's in Wisconsin, and so the regulations might be a little bit different than in Minnesota, but they're doing it in a socially distant format. And Chris also mentioned that they're changed their golf to an anytime tournament, kind of that go do it on your own time in a couple month period, which is pretty similar to the Animal Humane Society, like one day walk. So be sure to check out the summary of that event that we sent out ahead of time. But I think the other thing was just the idea that even if in Wisconsin they might be allowed to host a larger event, like Tessa mentioned that they're a hospital, and it doesn't necessarily fit with what they feel comfortable with as an organization, values-wise, bringing people together in a way that could infect more people. And so that's a consideration to think about, like what fits with your organization's values of what you feel like confident doing at a time like we're in.
Great. Thank you, Tricia. We're running a little behind. I'm a naughty host, so I'm going to pass it over to Alyssa, who I think is taking us into the next breakout session.
So we'll still spend the next 10 minutes in our breakout session. And the question for this time is, what effective fundraising technique have you seen or heard of in virtual events lately? If you haven't seen any, what ideas do you have that will bring money in during virtual events? All right, I think we have everyone back. Again, that was a quick 10 minutes, but I hope everybody's conversations went well. And maybe let's start with the first group.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, you go, Dan.
I took a few notes, so
Okay.
I don't mind going. So we talked a lot about auction items. Obviously, the sort of experiences that people may want to be having are difficult right now, but things like stay-at-home packages, things like alcohol industry is doing well. Nancy's church has some really fabulous ideas around selling their organist for like pre-recorded concerts, or other singers, other artists. I know Park Square was doing sort of live in-home performances via Zoom. So that was one sort of auction item approach that was working for some. And another was having the fund a need right in the auction platform is an opportunity for people to do gifts up to even like $10,000 or $20,000 through there. And then the other thing was just utilizing the technology that's in YouTube and maybe Facebook, others as well, where you can have either live or canned video, but then chat on the side, as well as some donation buttons right above that. Did I miss anything?
Oh, good job.
Got it all.
All great ideas, using technology to help us fundraise better. Thanks, Dan. The second group, I think that was my group.
Yeah, I said I'd chat a bit and step in if I miss anything. You know, we also chatted a bit about doing online auctions and, you know, trying to find some alternative items to use. You know, we started talking a little bit about different platforms to use. It sounds like there are some really interesting other platforms other than, you know, the Zoom options. We didn't get too deep into that, but it sounds like maybe there's a list out there that might be sent out that has some different options other than the ones we're all familiar with. We talked a little bit about, if you're doing these online events, if people may not stick around for the whole time, so really making sure to ask early and often so that, people may not stick around for the whole thing, or at least getting that ask made, and watching the time of the events. Maybe, it sounds like folks have had a lot of luck with breaking them up into a longer event into, shorter chunks that can be offered out individually.
Great. Thanks, Zach. The third group?
I think that was ours. Was that ours, Virginia? Okay. I said I'd take notes for that. We talked about a bunch of different things, a little more abstract than the specifics of some of the other groups, but kind of focused on the relationships being key, whether that's with keeping sponsors engaged, getting new sponsors, making sure that the audience is really engaged in whatever event you're doing, because that makes the experience better, and then ideally encourages that donation to happen. And to make sure you're tying things back to the mission as well. That was something I'd heard in a lot of events. They had more success if they kept tying it back, having stories from people who've benefited from the org and stuff like that. And then to make sure you invest in whatever online technology you need, not specific platforms, just whatever you need it to do, make sure that it does what you need so that you have less of those technical glitches and can have a good experience for attendees. And then we talked briefly about some of those watch party packets, participant packets, kind of physical items you can send out to still get some of that like in-person, physical, tangible part when it's an online event.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I love that, bringing it back to the mission, because I feel like now that we're not spending, $70,000 on food and stuff, it's really kind of focused on what are we trying to do, and that is fundraise for our organizations. The last group, Tricia's group.
Yeah, I'll give some tidbits. So we talked a little bit about peer-to-peer fundraising and sort of that idea of table captains and them being out in front of the event weeks in advance and doing the fundraising in advance leading up to an event would be essential or helpful in just getting out the word. A couple of us were talking about hybrid events in the fall where there would be likely some potential in-person opportunities, but also some virtual opportunities depending on how the event was managed. But we discussed how we might be navigating masks and how we might be navigating like comfort level with our donors, knowing that our donors are potentially in some of the higher risk populations. So how to do that in a way that makes them comfortable. I don't think we came up with an answer to that question, just acknowledging that it's something that we're going to have to tackle if we have any amount of in-person events. And that came along with that knowing what your individual regulations are and what the current recommendations are. One member of our group was in Wisconsin. So they have a very different, sounds like you can pretty much do whatever you want in Wisconsin, and we're in Minneapolis and that's just not the case. So trying to make sure we know what those regulations are and making sure we know what our donors need and what our donors need to feel comfortable in an environment. We also talked about sending out care packages in advance, whether that be like Grubhub gift cards so people can get food, or other little, at past events, we as an organization give out little cards, but sending that out in advance so then people also have an envelope so that they can send it back is an idea that we're looking at too. So, Tricia, did I get everything?
You got it. Thank you.
Carrie, you just kind of blew my mind. I cannot believe I haven't thought about having a pledge card in hand for a virtual event.
Yes, we learned that after our last event. We thought that would have made it a little more successful.
I also like the idea of like sending something like a t-shirt or something that people could put on for if you have like a live component of the event, just to build that community and like identity around the event. Just a thought off the top.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
And then-
we can't be far off from a lot more of the like designed Zoom backgrounds, or like having like, I don't know, like a mask ball, you know what I mean? Where you would have something physically that would change the way you're interacting with Zoom.
That's a cute idea. I like that, the masked ball.
Mhm.
Another random idea that I've had around some of like the sponsors and the partnerships is if you are having like a lunch, to partner with like a nearby restaurant to get like a discount code or get like some type of special. So, you know, you're putting it out there, like we're partnering with this this restaurant, and here is a discount code for you to get, you know, some lunch, because we're not actually providing lunch, but the people can buy their lunch and then still support other restaurants. So that's just an idea from the Grubhub comment earlier. And so also I just want to point out really fast in the chat, Whitney from my group, she was talking about different types of resources, and she put that in the chat, some other types of things for people to look at. So yeah, thanks everyone for going through that second round of breakout sessions, and I'll pass it off to Ellie.
Yeah, so Whitney already got us started on a lot of stuff. So if you see in the chat, there's a lot of different resources and platforms that you can use. Is there anything else that you guys, any resources that you've come across that you would like to share? You can either say it in the chat, or if you wanted to raise your hand and just.
Can I just say I've had very good experiences posting things to the AFP global forum that we all have access to. You may get a little daily or weekly reminder email. Do by all means try like putting your questions in there too if you have like specific things about an event you're looking for help with.
I agree, Dan. That's like one of my, don't take this the wrong way, one of my favorite things about being an AFP member is access to that listserv. I use it all the time. If there's aren't other questions, I would love to hear if anybody on the call has actually done the silent auction. Like, was it more or less successful than your normal silent auctions? I've just been really curious about how that's working fully virtual. Or not.
I haven't. I haven't, but I do know a colleague of mine, their silent auction was actually more successful, and he works for the Pinky Swear Foundation. So I don't know if anyone saw that gala on May 16th, but their silent auction actually exceeded their goal. So I was very surprised to hear that. Yeah.
We also had a silent auction, and I feel like it just performed just about as well as it usually does. We had about half the items, and we made about half the amount that we usually make. So.
Okay. That's really good to know. Well, we're coming up almost on 4:30, so thank you all for coming today. It was really great to hear all of your experiences, and thank you for spending time with us. All of our contact information is in that confirmation email you would have received from Tricia, so if you have any feedback for any of the presenters, please let us know. We'd like to go forward with this type of format, so any feedback is very valuable. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.